What's up guys? Today we're going to be showing you how to install SuperATV C-Series prop shafts on this RZR XP Turbo. First thing you're going to do is come back to the rear and remove all 4 of your Allen headed hardware securing your prop shaft to the transmission. I like to take an Allen wrench and then use my tire to leverage it to break it loose. Now we've already got our hardware removed except for one, but you'll just want to continue doing this until you get all of them loose, and then you can take a socket to get them removed. Once you have it removed, you can just slide it off the flange. Then we're going to come right here to our motor mount and remove both of our 13mm nuts. Then we'll take a pry bar, slide it up underneath the motor mount, pry the motor up, let it sit on the studs, and then we can grab a hold of our rear prop shaft and start sliding it out. Should slide out just like this. Then once we have the rear prop shaft removed, we're going to go to the front and remove our roll pin, securing our front prop shaft to our differential. So we're going to remove this roll pin right here out of our front prop. We already have a C-Series prop installed on the front of ours, so it's going to look a little different, but the removal will be the same. So what we did here, we just took an old socket, old extension, and a punch, and we're just going to line it up right in our roll pin. Get it good and lined up, and then we're just going to take a hammer and just start tapping it right out. So now moving on to the rear and the inside of the machine, we're going to go ahead and remove our seats. If you had a 2-seater, you'd just remove your front seats. Obviously, we're working on a 4-seater today. Just reach back here, grab a hold of the latch on the back of the seat. Next, we're going to go ahead and remove all the hardware, securing our rear console to the machine. Then we'll go up here and remove these push pins. Got 2 up here in the front. Then 1 on the opposite side of this one. If your push pin tabs stay in, go ahead and pop those out. Set them aside, that way you don't lose them. Just want to push your seatbelt boots through. Just remove this portion of the console. And if you have a rear plug back here, your 12-volt, just want to unplug that. Just like that. Take your rear console and you can set it aside. Ours is going to look a little bit different than yours. We already have a SuperATV carrier in this machine. What you'll need to do is take a razor blade or something that you can cut this section out of the plastic. And so all we did is we just went through, cut notches, that way we can get to our factory hardware. That way we can remove it without removing our gas tank and all of that. What you'll need to do is remove your 2 15mm bolts out of your carrier, which will be located on either side. Our removal process is going to be very similar, but a little bit different. We'll remove our top cap and then our 15mm bolts. So we removed our upper portion of our carrier. Again, if you don't already have a SuperATV carrier, you won't have to worry about this portion here. You just remove your 2 15mm big bolts that are going to the frame. So you have to pull your coolant hoses on your driver's side out of the way in order to get the socket down in here to get onto your hardware. I usually just use a pry bar. And then get your socket on an extension. And then probably the trickiest part about the whole thing is getting the bolt out after you have it removed. It's kind of tight down in here. Again, that's why we notched everything that we did. Just makes it easier. Once you've got your carrier loose, what you'd have to do is pull your pillow block off. So this is what the factory prop's going to look like. It's gonna be bolted in just like this. This is where your two 15mm bolts would be. The best way to get this apart, especially if the bearing's junk, is you'll just take a pry bar and shove up in this lip and just pull on it. You know, just keep working it until it'll want to come apart. A lot of times you can do it by hand. It is just a little bit more difficult. Again, you just kind of got to wrestle it around, and you want to make sure that you get the rubber off of it. And once you get the rubber off, then we'll be able to feed our prop shaft out the rear. So now we're ready to reach down through here, grab a hold of our prop shaft. And sometimes it'll get stuck on the diff. If it does, you just go up to the front with a pry bar and pry it off the pinion shaft. So there we go, we're off the pinion shaft. So now we should be able to go back in our machine and start feeding our prop shaft out towards the rear. So once we get it going towards the back, we'll just remove our access panel here. You just grab a hold of it, pull it off, very simple. And then just grab this prop and just keep feeding it out towards the rear. So we'll just grab our prop once we got it back here to the rear. Just wiggle it around. And you want to try to get it up and above the clutch cover as you're working it. And then you just slide it right out. So now that we have both of our props removed as well as the factory carrier, it's going to be time to get our rear portion of our rear prop shaft installed to the transmission. So the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that your machine's in park. We've already done that. So we're going to jump over here and remove our shock bolt from our trailing arm. So once we've removed our nut, pick up on our trailing arm, go ahead and just wiggle our bolt out, and then let the trailing arm drop out, remove the shock, and move it to the side. So now that we've done that, we can go ahead and grab a 30mm socket or a 30mm wrench. And we're gonna go right here to where our flange is on our transmission, and we're gonna go ahead and remove the nut. And whenever we remove this nut, we want to make sure that we keep track of both the washer as well as the lock washer. And then we can just go ahead and pull our flange off, just like this. And then we're going to come over here to our prop shaft. We're going to remove each of the screws. It's just an 8mm 12-point. You can use a socket or a wrench. So once we've removed all of our hardware, we're going to take this portion of the CV off. You may have to give it a couple taps. Once you give it a couple taps, it should come right off, no problem. We're going to take this end that's splined, the one that has the holes on it, and this is going to slide onto the transmission just like this. And then we're going to take our hardware that we removed off the factory flange and reinstall it just like it came off. Just have to slide them up in there onto the shaft. And then just thread them in, thread your nut in, and then you'll have to use a 30mm socket to tighten your nut now. So once we've taken our 30mm socket and gotten our nut fully tightened, we're going to go ahead and grab our front prop shaft. So whenever you open up your carrier bearing kit, you're going to see a bearing in there. It's going to have a grease zerk on top of it. It won't have the fittings on it just yet, and your bearing's going to be sitting in here. So this prop shaft is going to sit like this in the machine, so the splines are going to be facing towards the rear. Now your carrier bearing is going to have a groove on it. This is what we call the grease ring. This grease ring is going to be facing towards the front or towards your front CV, which this CV right here will have a hole in it because obviously that's where your roll pin is going to go. It's very important that whenever you go to install this, that you make sure that your grease ring is towards the rear. So with that being said, ours is already set up and ready to go. And you're going to take the green retaining compound that's in the kit, put it on the shaft, and install your bearing. Once you've done that, you'll install your snap ring, and then you'll be ready to install your front prop shaft. So then we're just going to slide our prop shaft in. Let's go right beside the clutch cover. We're just going to slide it in as far as we can get it. And then we'll have to go to the inside and start feeding it towards the front as far as it'll go. And then we'll go up here to the front All right, so once we have our prop shaft all the way up here, we're going to go ahead and slide it onto the pinion shaft on the front differential. Just want to make sure that we line our roll pin hole up. And then you're just going to want to slide it all the way as far as you can forward on the pinion shaft. And once we do that, we're going to take the lower portion of the carrier here. And we want to make sure that the machined edge, which is this one right here, lines up with this machined edge. And the SuperATV is facing towards the rear. And the long ear, which as you can see, this side's shorter than this side, the long ear of the carrier is facing towards the passenger side. So we're going to set it up just like this, but we're only going to be installing the lower portion right now. So what I like to do is I like to go ahead, slide this in here, and you just have to slide it up underneath the bearing and get it lined up with the factory holes. So it should look just like this. Then what you're going to want to do is take your hardware provided in the kit, and it does come with Loctite. We're just going to use it. Just make sure you use blue Loctite. You don't want to use anything else. Just get your bolt slid down in here, get it lined up with the threads, and then go ahead and start your hardware on either side. So there we've got a couple threads started on the passenger side, and we're going to repeat the same thing on the driver's side. But remember, whenever we pulled this apart, we took a pry bar and we moved our coolant hoses to the side. For this side over here, we have our hose pulled back out of the way. We're going to make sure that our carrier is lined up perfectly with the hole in the frame. So we went ahead and we got both of our bolts started with blue Loctite on them that secure the lower portion of the carrier to the frame of the machine utilizing the factory mounting holes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to lift our machine back up and we're going to install our rear prop shaft, making sure that it meshes and goes together with the front prop shaft. So now we're going to grab our rear prop, we're going to slide it in the same way that we slid our front prop in. So have to work it through the frame. It will get a little bit tight. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go inside and we're going to make sure that both our prop shafts are connecting together. And then we may have to jack our motor up just a little bit more, or maybe even take our clutch cover off to get our prop shaft in, depending on which make, model, year you have and which clutch cover you have. All right, so we have our prop shaft dropped in, ready to mate up with the front prop shaft. Now, as you can see here, it's a pretty tight fit right now. You're just gonna have to take your hand and kind of work it in here and try to get them coupled together. And once you have them coupled together, then you'll be able to slide your front prop back and your rear prop forward. So we've got them to where they're touching on the splines, and just try to get them to go together. So once we have our rear prop shaft shoved as far forward as it's gonna go, we're gonna head back to the rear and we're gonna go ahead and start installing our bolts that we previously removed from the CV. So next what we're going to do is we're going to couple the prop shaft to the flange that we installed to the transmission. Now obviously we're going to be reusing the screws that we previously removed out of the flange, and you're just going to reinstall it the same way that it came to you in the box. So you're just going to make sure your holes are lined up, and you're going to go through and get all of your hardware started. Once we have all the hardware started, we'll kick the transmission in neutral, go around, rotate, and tighten them as we go. And since our shock is still unhooked, for ease of access, you want to pick up on your wheel and then turn it. That way your axle's not in a bind. And again, we just want to go through and get all of these fully started. Once we have them all started, then we'll go through and fully tighten them all. Before you tighten your hardware, you want to make sure that you reinstall your shock bolt. Now we're going to go ahead and reinstall our motor mount. Now we're just going to take our pry bar, kind of use this to pry it back into position. So it should sit down just like that. Make sure that these little dowels are going down into the actual frame. And spin our tires, make sure that everything's good. And this is also going to help center that carrier. Looks like we're not making any contact anywhere, which is good. And we're going to go ahead and reinstall our 13mm nuts to our studs on our motor mount. And we're just going to go ahead and install our new roll pin. So now what we're going to do is line the grease ring up on the bearing to the grease ring on the carrier. So what you may have to do is pick up on your prop, and rotate the lower portion of the carrier until you have it all completely lined up. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and get your 4 Allen-headed screws that secure the carrier together. Get some Loctite, apply it to each of them, and have them all ready to go. And you can take the upper portion of your carrier and make sure that the SuperATV is going towards the rear. And then we're going to slide it into position with the upper portion of the carrier here. So we're just going to go through and start all of our hardware. Once we have it all started, we'll tighten it all in an X pattern, along with the hardware securing the lower portion to the frame. So now what we're going to do, now that we have all of our hardware started, we're going to go ahead and torque the 2 14mm bolts securing the lower portion of the carrier to the frame to 45 foot-pounds, and the 4 Allen-headed screws are going to get torqued to 20 foot-pounds. Then what we do is go ahead and pump 4 to 5 pumps of grease into the carrier bearing, or if you're going to run the remote grease line, you can check out our video on YouTube on SuperATV Media on our grease line installation. So once we have all that done, we're going to reinstall our components, and that's how super quick and easy it is to install SuperATV's C-Series prop shaft on this RZR Turbo 4-seat. For more information on this prop shaft or any of SuperATV's great products, feel free to give us a call at 855-743-3427 or check us out online at superatv.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.